It was the kind of night where even the stars seemed to hold their breath. Inside the heavy stone walls of the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, a single light flickered against the dark, restless sky. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat alone at his massive oak desk, his brow furrowed over a stack of confidential documents. Every page he turned whispered of danger. Every word threatened to pull the future of Burkina Faso into the abyss. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the wrong decision tonight could cost not just his presidency, but the soul of a nation. Then came the knock. Soft, hesitant. The door creaked open and Marie, his loyal assistant, stepped inside. She clutched a sealed envelope with both hands, her knuckles white against the paper. Her face, usually calm and composed, was drawn tight with worry. Without speaking, she crossed the room and placed the envelope in front of him. "Mr. President," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This just arrived. It's urgent." Ibrahim's heart pounded as he slit the envelope open with a steady hand. Inside was a detailed intelligence report, the kind of document that never brought good news. As he scanned the pages, his breath caught in his throat. There it was, a list of names tied to a plot to overthrow his government. Mercenaries, political rivals, even supposed allies. But one name leapt out, burning itself into his mind, refusing to be unseen. Amadou Diallo, his childhood friend, his brother in all but blood. The boy he'd once raced through dusty village streets with, the young man who had stood beside him through years of hardship and dreams. Ibrahim stared at the name, his vision blurring, a coldness creeping into his veins. It felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. This can't be true," he murmured, voice hollow. His eyes stayed fixed on the name, as if by sheer will he could erase it from existence. Marie remained silent, sensing the rawness of the wound opening before her. She understood what Amadou meant to him, not just politically, but personally, soul deep. After a long, unbearable pause, Marie cleared her throat gently. "Sir, what do you want to do? Should we mobilize the security forces?" Ibrahim leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling as if searching for an answer among the cracked plaster and ancient wooden beams. No. This wasn't something that could be solved with guns and orders barked through radios. This betrayal was too personal, too deep. If there was still a shred of loyalty, of brotherhood left in Amadou's heart, he had to see it for himself. Slowly, deliberately, he stood, straightened his military jacket, looked Marie straight in the eye. "No," he said, voice steady as iron. "I'll handle this myself." Outside, the palace gates loomed in the moonlight like the jaws of some ancient beast. Ibrahim climbed into a car, alone, the engine's low growl the only sound as he pulled away into the shadows. He would drive through the night, leaving behind the armor of office, leaving behind the trappings of power. Tonight, he wasn't a president. He was just a man confronting the unthinkable, that the brother he trusted most might be the knife aimed at his back. And as the dark horizon swallowed him whole, one thought hammered in his mind. What do you do when the person you love becomes the person you fear the most? The car's headlights sliced through the heavy darkness as Ibrahim Traoré sped down the desolate roads of Burkina Faso. The city lights of Ouagadougou faded behind him, swallowed by the endless stretch of night. Every mile he drove deeper into the unknown, the heavier his heart became. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, not from fear of what lay ahead, but from the storm raging inside him. The hum of the engine was a low, steady companion to the flood of memories crashing through his mind. He saw two barefoot boys racing through the dusty fields of Bonduku, laughing until their sides ached. He remembered nights lying under the stars, dreaming wild dreams of changing their country, of building something better from the ruins they were born into. Back then it had been simple. The world was cruel, but they were young and stubborn. They believed, with all their hearts, that brotherhood and courage were enough to conquer anything. And now, this. Now Ibrahim was chasing the ghost of those promises through the dark, driving not to embrace his brother, but to confront him as a possible enemy. His mind kept replaying the report. Amadu's name, printed coldly in black ink among those plotting to tear apart everything they once vowed to protect. The outskirts of Bobo Dioulasso crept into view, small, tired houses huddled against the wind. Ibrahim turned down a narrow dirt path, the tires kicking up clouds of dust. There it was, a modest home, tucked away under the shadow of a great baobab tree, its windows dimly lit. According to the intelligence report, this was where Amadu had been last seen. Ibrahim killed the engine and sat in the silence for a moment, staring at the worn front door. His pulse thundered in his ears. Whatever happened inside that house tonight, there would be no turning back. He climbed out of the car and walked up to the door, his footsteps slow, deliberate. He raised his hand and knocked, 3 sharp raps against the wood. There was a shuffle inside, the sound of someone hesitating. Then the door creaked open. And there he was. Amadou Diallo stood in the doorway, older now but unmistakable. Tall, wiry, with the same searching eyes Ibrahim remembered from boyhood. For a moment, the two men simply stared at each other, time collapsing between them. Ibrahim, Amadou breathed, stunned. "What are you doing here?" Ibrahim didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned his old friend's face, searching for the boy he once knew, searching for a crack in the hardened lines of betrayal. Finally, his voice low and heavy, Ibrahim replied, "I could ask you the same, my brother. Why are you doing this?" Amadou glanced nervously over his shoulder, then stepped aside, motioning for Ibrahim to come in. The house was small, sparsely furnished, a battered table, 2 wooden chairs, a few old photos hanging crookedly on the walls. One photo caught Ibrahim's eye. The two of them, young and smiling, arms slung around each other's shoulders, frozen in a moment of pure, unbreakable trust. They sat across from each other at the table, the silence thick as smoke. "You know why I'm doing this?" Amadou said finally, voice rough with emotion. He looked older than his years, worn down by battles Ibrahim hadn't even seen. "Our people are suffering, Ibrahim. They cry for help and no one listens, not even you." Pain flashed across Ibrahim's face. "You think I don't hear them?" he said, his voice rising slightly. "I grew up among them, just like you. I have bled for this country, but tearing everything down, overthrowing the government, will only drown our people in more chaos and blood." Amadou's hands trembled slightly as he clasped them together on the table. "You changed, Ibrahim. Power changed you. You're not the boy who used to sit by the fire and dream about a free Burkina Faso." "I am still that boy," Ibrahim said fiercely. "But I learned that real change is hard. It's slow. It's messy. It doesn't come from guns and uprisings. It comes from building, brick by brick, even when it feels like the whole world is pushing back." For a long moment, Amadou said nothing. His jaw clenched, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Then, almost in a whisper, he confessed, "I just wanted to help. I felt invisible. I thought maybe if I shook the system, someone would finally listen." His voice cracked on the last word, and suddenly he buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, years of frustration and heartbreak pouring out in front of the man he had once called brother. Ibrahim's chest tightened painfully. This wasn't the cold-blooded traitor he had imagined during the long drive through the night. This was still Amadou, the boy who once gave him half of his last meal, who once took a beating to protect him from bullies. A misguided soul, yes. But not beyond redemption. Slowly, Ibrahim reached out across the table. His hand, calloused from years of battle, hovered for a moment, then rested firmly on Amadou's trembling shoulder. "If you truly want to help," he said, his voice low but steady, "then stand with me, brother. Let's rebuild this country right, not with bullets, with hope." Amadou looked up, eyes wide and red-rimmed. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then, hesitantly, almost fearfully, he extended his hand. Ibrahim took it. Their palms met in a handshake that was less a symbol of forgiveness and more a fragile truce, one soaked in tears, regret, and the fragile, flickering hope that the bond they once shared might just be enough to save them both. But deep inside, both men knew Forgiveness was only the first step. Trust would be a much harder road. And outside, beyond the thin walls of that small house, forces darker and more ruthless than either of them knew were already gathering. The engine had barely cooled when Ibrahim Traoré stepped back onto the grounds of the presidential palace. The walls that once felt like a fortress of strength now loomed heavy and cold around him, suffocating in their silence. His steps were slow, each footfall weighed down by the conversation he had just left behind. He had gone to Bobo Dioulasso, searching for a traitor, and found instead a broken brother begging for redemption. Yet no matter how clear his heart felt in that moment, he knew the world outside would see only betrayal and weakness. The heavy oak doors of the council chamber swung open. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. His generals, ministers, and advisers sat in a tight, rigid semicircle around the long table, faces carved from stone. All eyes locked onto him the moment he entered, some with concern, others with doubt, and a few with barely concealed disdain. They had all been waiting for their president to deliver swift justice, to send a message that betrayal would be met with fire and iron. General Kabor, his most senior military advisor, was the first to speak. "Mr. President," he said, his voice clipped formal. "We received your report. What happened in Bobo Dioulasso? Have the conspirators been detained?" Ibrahim remained standing at the head of the table. He let the silence stretch, feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on him like a vice. Finally he spoke, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Amadou Diallo confessed to his involvement," he said, the syllables heavy on his tongue. "But he did not act out of ambition or malice. He acted because he believed, wrongly, that he was helping our people." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some leaned forward, anger flashing in their eyes. Others exchanged wary glances, unsure of where this was heading. General Kabore's jaw tightened. "Intentions do not excuse treason, sir. Mercy in such times could cost us dearly. It sets a precedent, one we cannot afford." The Minister of Justice, an older man with silver hair and a sharp gaze, nodded in agreement. "Mr. President," he said gravely, "showing leniency now would be interpreted as weakness. It would invite others to do the same. We must be firm, unyielding." Ibrahim's gaze swept the room. He saw the fear hidden behind their anger, the fear of instability, of chaos creeping back through the cracks they had fought so hard to seal. He understood it. He shared it. But leadership wasn't about giving in to fear. It was about choosing the harder road when the easy one screamed your name. He stepped closer to the table, both hands planted firmly on its polished surface. His voice, when he spoke again, was low, controlled but powerful. "If we punish every man who stumbles," he said, "we will soon stand alone. Leadership is not just about crushing dissent. It is about recognizing when a man has lost his way, and helping him find it again. It's about building bridges, not burning them down." The room fell into stunned silence. Ibrahim let his words settle, let them echo in the heavy, expectant air. He continued, unwavering. "Amadou Diallo will not be executed. He will not be imprisoned. Instead, he will be removed from his government position and assigned to work directly with rural communities, those he claims to fight for. There, he can rebuild trust, not through violence, but through service." Gasps broke out. Whispers filled the chamber like an incoming storm. Some ministers shook their heads in disbelief. Others exchanged glances of cautious admiration. The Minister of Justice rose from his seat, his face pale. "Mr. President, with all due respect, this is dangerous. You are gambling the credibility of your leadership on a single man's repentance." Ibrahim looked him dead in the eye. "No, Minister," he said quietly. "I am gambling on the idea that our people deserve leaders who can be better than their enemies, leaders who believe in redemption as fiercely as they believe in justice." Around the table, lines were drawn. Some nodded in grudging respect, others stiffened in outright defiance, but no one dared openly challenge him, not tonight. Not yet. Moments later, the doors opened once again. Amadou Diallo entered the chamber, his head bowed low, shoulders hunched under the crushing weight of shame. He wore no fancy suit, no military uniform, just simple, worn clothes. He looked more like the boy Ibrahim remembered than he ever had as a government official. He approached Ibrahim, stopped a few feet away, and lowered himself to one knee in front of everyone. "I don't know if I deserve your forgiveness," Amadou said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn it." The room watched in stunned silence as Ibrahim stepped forward, reached down, and gently lifted his friend to his feet. "No one is born deserving of trust," Ibrahim said, loud enough for every soul in that room to hear. "We prove it, day by day, action by action." Amadou's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He nodded, unable to speak. As the meeting adjourned, ministers filed out in hushed groups, some shooting Ibrahim questioning looks, others lingering as if seeing him for the first time. Marie remained by the doorway, waiting patiently. As Ibrahim approached, she offered a small, tired smile. The kind you give when words would only cheapen the moment. "The hardest road is often the right one, sir," she said softly. Ibrahim smiled faintly in return, though the weight on his shoulders had only grown heavier. He knew he had made a decision that would define his presidency, for better or worse. Later that night, when the palace had gone quiet and the last echoes of political debate had faded into silence, Ibrahim found himself standing alone in the gardens. The cool night air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. He looked up at the stars, searching for answers he knew might never come. Had he done the right thing? Had he planted seeds of loyalty or seeds of future betrayal? The only certainty he had was this: true leadership demanded sacrifice, demanded faith not just in others, but in the very ideals that first inspired him to dream beneath these same stars so many years ago. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, unseen by his eyes but sensed by some deep, unshakable instinct, new storms were already gathering. The decision had been made, but Ibrahim Traoré knew the battle was far from over. Inside the palace war room, the maps of Burkina Faso stretched across the long tables, each marked with colored pins indicating loyal territories, suspected strongholds, and pockets of unrest. With a steady voice and unwavering gaze, Ibrahim issued his next command. "Mobilize the security forces. Root out the remaining conspirators," he said, pausing just long enough to let the weight of his words settle. "But remember, those who show genuine repentance will be given a chance. We are not merely crushing rebellion, we are offering a path back to the light." His generals nodded, some with hesitation, others with newfound respect. It was a bold strategy, one that walked the razor's edge between strength and mercy. But Ibrahim knew the soul of a nation was not forged in fear. It was built with hands willing to heal as much as they fought. Days later, with the initial wave of arrests underway, Ibrahim refused to remain cloistered behind palace walls. He wanted to see the country with his own eyes, hear its heartbeat with his own ears. So he set out. No grand motorcade, no throngs of bodyguards, only a small, discreet team as he traveled deep into the rural villages that had borne the brunt of the political storms. In a small village north of Ouagadougou, he found her, Fatou, a young widow, her face lined by hardship, far beyond her years. She stood at the edge of a crumbling courtyard, clutching a faded photograph to her chest. As Ibrahim approached, she turned to face him, her hands trembling slightly, her children hiding shyly behind her legs. "Mr. President," she said, her voice cracking like dry earth. "I don't ask for riches, I don't ask for power, I just want my children to grow up in peace." For a moment, the world stilled. Without hesitation, Ibrahim stepped forward and gently took Fatou's hand in both of his. His grip was firm, steady. The grip of someone who understood loss, who carried the same invisible scars. "You have my word," he said, his voice low and solemn. "We will not abandon you. Your children will have a future worth fighting for." Tears welled in Fatou's eyes, but she managed a shaky smile, a small, fragile bloom of hope in soil long thought barren. Around them, villagers began to gather, drawn by the sight of a leader who knelt beside his people, who listened not with speeches, but with silence and promise. From that moment, something began to shift, not just in that village, but across the nation. A belief, fragile but growing, that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Weeks later, Ibrahim stood before a different crowd, but the spirit was the same. This time, it was at the New Innovation Center, an initiative born from the ashes of conflict, dedicated to rebuilding Burkina Faso not just through aid, but through empowerment. The Dignity Through Self-Sufficiency program was the crown jewel of this vision. Teaching farming techniques, promoting education, providing tools for communities to lift themselves out of poverty with their own hands. Children laughed and played. In the sunlit courtyard, their voices carrying high over the gathered crowd. Among them was Malik, a boy who not long ago had been lying sick in a makeshift hospital, fevered and frail. Now he wore a crisp new sweater, his cheeks full and bright, a living testament to what hope, once planted, could become. Ibrahim watched. Malik run to the front, proudly holding up a board filled with photos. Farmers harvesting record crops, students working in refurbished classrooms, young inventors tinkering with solar panels. It was not the image of a broken country. It was the image of a nation rebuilding itself from the inside out. Wearing traditional Burkinabe attire, Ibrahim stepped onto the modest wooden stage. He took a breath, feeling the weight of every eye, every hope resting on his shoulders. "We are not here today to celebrate statistics," he began, his voice ringing clear across the courtyard. "We are not here to admire policies written on paper. We are here to honor the true builders of Burkina Faso, the farmers, the teachers, the mothers, the children, the ordinary people whose hands and hearts have never stopped working for a better tomorrow." The crowd erupted into cheers, a sea of clapping hands and tear-streaked smiles. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled frantically, and Ibrahim wasn't done. He turned to face the live feed camera, fully aware of who might be watching half a world away. His gaze was steady, direct. "Mr. Trump," he said, voice sharpened by resolve but softened with pride. "You once called me naive. You mocked my faith in small victories. But I want you and the world to see. Our naivete is changing lives. Our strength lies not in conquest, but in connection. In the daily, stubborn acts of building a better future together." The crowd roared louder, a tidal wave of affirmation that swept over the courtyard. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, inside a studio bathed in harsh lights and muted colors, former U.S. President Donald Trump leaned forward in his chair, watching the broadcast. For a long moment, he said nothing, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Then, to the surprise of the host and the millions watching live, he spoke. Maybe I underestimated him," Trump admitted, shaking his head slightly, a small, reluctant smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "This guy's got something special." The comment exploded across social media, spreading like wildfire, reigniting debates about leadership, courage, and the power of conviction in the face of cynicism. Back in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré stepped down from the stage, the cheers still echoing in his ears. But his mind was not on applause. It was already racing ahead, to the challenges yet to come. He knew better than anyone that one speech, one program, one village was not enough. The seeds had been planted, but storms could still come. Enemies still lurked in the shadows, whispering, scheming. But for the first time in a long time, Ibrahim did not feel alone. He felt the weight of a nation standing with him, not behind him, not beneath him, but with him. And as he looked out across the sea of faces, young and old, tired but unbroken, he allowed himself a rare, fleeting smile. The real fight was just beginning. The night had wrapped itself around the palace in a soft, solemn hush. Stars blinked faintly against the endless velvet of the sky as Ibrahim Traoré wandered through the palace gardens, his hands clasped behind his back, each step slow and deliberate. The scent of the earth after a long day of sun drifted up from the flower beds, mingling with the cool breeze that tugged at the edges of his traditional cloak. Out here, away from the polished floors and sharpened arguments of the council chambers. He could almost pretend, for just a moment, that the weight on his shoulders was lighter, almost. He paused beneath an ancient baobab tree, its gnarled branches twisting upward like the grasping hands of history. Tilting his head back, he studied the sky. The same sky he had once stared up at as a barefoot boy in Bonduku, whispering dreams into the night with Amadou at his side. Dreams of unity, of hope. The memory of Amadou's tearful handshake still burned fresh in his mind. The memory of the minister's skeptical glances burned even hotter. Ibrahim drew a slow breath, the cool air filling his lungs like a balm and a burden all at once. In the quiet of the garden, he whispered to himself, almost in prayer, "If I can't forgive my brother, how can I ever unite my nation?" The words hung in the air, fragile and powerful, like a bridge strung across a chasm of mute. Footsteps crunched softly over the gravel behind him. He turned slightly, expecting one of his guards, but it was Marie. Always Marie, loyal, steady, knowing when to speak and when to simply be present. She held a steaming cup of tea in her hands, offering it without a word. Ibrahim accepted it, with a nod of gratitude. As he took a sip, she spoke, her voice gentle but certain. "You've lit a flame of hope, sir," she said. "Don't let it die." Ibrahim managed a faint smile, one laced with exhaustion, with the ache of a man who knew the path ahead would be thornier than anything he had yet walked. "I intend to keep it burning," he said quietly, though deep down he knew the winds of coming storms would test that flame again and again, because even now, as he stood under the indifferent stars, he felt it, the unseen currents shifting. Not all enemies had been unmasked. Not all conspiracies had been crushed. Beneath the surface of temporary calm, deeper shadows stirred, waiting for the right moment to strike. Forgiveness was not a sign of weakness. He understood that now more than ever. Forgiveness was choosing to rebuild when destruction would be easier. It was the bravest and hardest choice a leader could ever make. Still, courage alone might not be enough for the battles that lay ahead, because just when Ibrahim thought the storm had passed, a darker conspiracy was already brewing. Stay tuned for the next chapter of his journey. Comment hope if you believe forgiveness can change the world. Like and subscribe to follow Ibrahim's battle for redemption.